Thank you very much. And welcome to Cats and Dogs here on Press TV with me, Len Topic. And this week, we celebrate the work of a man who perhaps uniquely has separated the duty of leadership from the art of public speaking. Yes, I mean Joe Biden, the only politician old enough to be able to stand on Manhattan Island and say, "I remember when all this was fields." Joe the Apologist has delivered an historic speech in defense of what he describes as an extraordinary success, otherwise known by the rest of us as a desperate military disaster. In fact, the only thing more disastrous than the US withdrawal from Afghanistan and the humiliating evacuation of Kabul airport was Joe Biden's speech about it. Okay, so he aimed to reassure anxious Americans, fair enough. But either Biden is living in an altered reality or he's auditioning for stand-up comedy. I mean, if you take his words seriously, you might imagine the evacuation of the US troops was something like this.
I'm a poor, lonesome cowboy. I'm a long, long way from home. And this poor, lonesome cowboy has got a long, long way to roam.
However, the reality was a little bit more like this.
I'm a poor, lonesome cowboy. I'm a long, long way from home. And this poor, lonesome cowboy has got a long, long way to roam. Over mountains, over prairies.
So why the gulf between his claims and the reality? My theory, and I always have a theory, is that wily old Biden got his times mixed up, and by times I mean eras, of history. You see, it all makes sense if, in his confusion, he was reliving the early days of his political career centuries ago, as a senator addressing the Athenian assembly around 465 BC, before the internet, smartphones, social media, electricity, television, radio, telephones, houses, steam engines, and carrier pigeons. Right back to a time when political news was delivered by marathon men running 26 miles on foot. So you could get away with a lot more back then. Unfortunately for Mr. Biden, gone are the days when you can cover up your military meltdowns with a speech. Come on, Joe. Do you even believe the mission to evacuate Americans and Afghan allies was an extraordinary success? Unless he's aiming to use his speech as a voiceover of some sort for news reports and submit it all as a film noir nomination for the Sundance Ironic Movie of the Year award. In which case, he is indeed likely to be extraordinarily successful. During this extraordinary success, 13 troops from the United States and nearly 200 Afghans lost their lives at Kabul airport. Did Mr. President maybe expect the number to be much higher? Just like his predecessor, who expected the number of COVID-19 victims in the US to be over 1 million. That mindset could turn a lot of failures into success. On that basis, the US was extraordinarily successful in the Vietnam War. Donald Trump had an extraordinarily successful re-election campaign. And the England football team achieved extraordinary success every time they miss a penalty. Or is it too soon for that one? Back in Kabul, the US lost as many personnel in weeks as it was losing over the course of a whole year. In a dark twist, Biden did keep his promise on one thing. He promised to evacuate soldiers, and he did, though sadly the numbers are made up of those alive and dead. But what mattered was the evacuation. The urgency of a time is particularly ironic since Biden himself seems to be timeless. By the way, that specially calibrated watch tells him the time in centuries, because they didn't have one with thousands of years. Still, in an effort to keep up the momentum, with Biden International Airways, you snooze, you lose.
We completed one of the biggest airlifts in history. That number is more than double what most experts felt were possible. No nation has ever done anything like it in all of history.
Yes, if it's good enough for Tom Cruise, it's good enough for Afghan refugees. Now, have you ever come home from a holiday and decided not to bring everything back, perhaps not bothering to pack an old toothbrush or something for the journey home? Well, that's exactly what the Americans did in Afghanistan, where they also left one or two things out of their baggage, like weapons, military equipment, and dogs.
Secretary of State Blinken is leading the continued diplomatic efforts to ensure safe passage for any American, Afghan partner, or foreign national who wants to leave Afghanistan.
People say dogs are a man's best friend, but I bet dogs aren't saying that about Biden these days. Incidentally, General Kenneth Mackenzie said there was not a single American man, woman, or dog on board the last 5 planes to leave Afghan soil. Whatever happened to putting America first? Woof, woof. Meanwhile, a Royal Marine called Paul Penn Farthing rescued animals in Afghanistan in a mission dubbed Operation Ark. But it said human stuff were left behind. To explain why, here's a clip from a British military training video exclusively obtained by Cats and Dogs. Let's get back to Biden's amazing speech.
We completed one of the biggest airlifts in history.
If size matters, it was indeed truly impressive. A little like Germany's retreat from Moscow. Now here's Biden's attempt to win the 2021 Understatement of the Year award.
That assumption that the Afghan government would be able to hold on for a period of time beyond military drawdown turned out not to be accurate.
Turned out not to be accurate? Never ask Biden to give you an estimate for home building work. The US president was a little bit more honest about his knowledge of how many soldiers were still stuck in Afghanistan.
And those who may have come home to the United States, we want to get a strong number as to exactly how many people are there, how many American citizens, and where they are.
You spent $2 trillion and you forget to buy a notebook for the roll call? How about this for military predictions?
The overwhelming consensus was that they were not going to collapse. The Afghan forces, they were not going to leave. They were not going to just abandon and then put down their arms and take off.
Never trust a weather forecast offered by Joe Biden. If he says it's going to rain, take sun cream.
We will maintain the fight against terrorism in Afghanistan and other countries.
Uh-oh. This can only mean one thing. Biden is going to do what they always do at a moment of presidential crisis. Invade Afghanistan. Again. At least then they might find the people they left behind the last time. And maybe that's also why they left all that nice military hardware behind, so the Taliban could look after it for them until the Americans come back.
Remember why we went to Afghanistan in the first place? Because we were attacked by Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda on September 11th, 2001.
Just as well bin Laden and his group weren't in the United States, otherwise America would have had to invade itself.
We succeeded in what we set out to do in Afghanistan over a decade ago. Then we stayed for another decade.
Ah, so that's it. American justice equals summary execution, an invasion, a retreat, and then a comedy speech by the president.
For now, I urge all Americans to join me in grateful prayer for our troops and diplomats and intelligence officers.
At last, we learn the truth. Biden's presidential plan was always to pray for a miracle. All in all, Biden's analysis of this great success is about as credible as the core philosophy of the Flat Earth Society. Except for two things. When you look around, the Earth does look kind of flat, doesn't it? So their claims got rather more credibility than Biden's Afghan analysis. And secondly, if you tell the flat earthers they're wrong, they won't invade and occupy your country for 20 years. That's all for this week. Join me again next time to find out if the US has found any more of its military personnel, whether the Taliban are taking good care of US military hardware, perhaps by using it from time to time, and if Joe Biden will finally make that long-awaited speech to celebrate their success in Vietnam. That's all on Press TV with me, Len Potopic, and Cats and Dogs.